got a nice virtual audience joining us today, but I want to welcome all of you to this installment of the Chamber's Transportation First event, featuring today a conversation about the state of the airport and Massport Authority. I'm Jim Mooney, President and CEO of the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce, for those that I don't know. And here at the Chamber, we continue to serve as a leading convener of the region's business community, bringing together people to have a dialogue about important public policy and business issues. In today's presentation, as I said in our Transportation First event series, we'll feature the CEO of Massport, Rich Davey. Rich, thank you for joining us today. And then that will be followed by a conversation in which we tapped the board member of Massport, Pam Everhart, on the shoulder and said, Pam, would you join us? Pam is a long engaged member of the Chamber, very active in what we do, head of regional public affairs, including an impact of Fidelity Investments. So between the three of us, I'm sure it'll be an interesting conversation. A little bit about the Transportation First series, if this is your first one of those. This is a way that we've brought together government, business leaders, to talk about moving us forward on strategies and solutions for our broader transportation network and systems here in Massachusetts. Our view and the view of the members of the Greater Boston Chamber are that there's some urgency in the need to create a 21st century world-class transportation system that our policymakers, employers, residents all recognize as a public good, and that the business, not just the business community, but the citizens of Massachusetts want to preserve. So we launched this series that by suggesting that by putting transportation first, we are also helping to solve so many other public policy issues. And by that I mean, if you think about solutions to our housing crisis, transportation and mobility is one of the factors in solving that. If you think about environment and climate change issues, transportation is a prominent role in that. If you think about social equity and access to jobs, to health care, to education, transportation has a role in dealing with those issues. So while we do talk about those other issues prominently as well, the thought is that transportation first solves not only the mobility questions and helps us with our economic development, but helps address those goals as well. I want to thank our sponsor for this series, State Street, and its CEO, Ron O'Hanley, who has made transportation a centerpiece of his public policy advocacy work on behalf of the business community. And when I talked to Ron about this series, he stepped up and said, A, we should do it, and B, State Street will sponsor it, making it free and available to all. So we're very grateful to State Street for that. With that, I'm pleased to introduce today's speakers. As I mentioned, Rich Davey, the CEO of Massport, and our panelists, Pam Everhart, a member of the Massport Board of Directors. Starting with Rich, a longtime friend who just couldn't sort of stay away from Boston and Massachusetts, is the CEO of Massport, leading an organization with revenues over $1 billion. It has a mission of connecting Boston, Massachusetts, and the region with the rest of the world. Rich has over 2 decades of accomplishment and experience in the transportation and infrastructure sectors. Prior to joining Massport, he was president of the New York City Transit System, the largest transit system in North America. Before that, he served as Massachusetts Secretary of Transportation under former Governor Deval Patrick, and then General Manager of the MBTA. Another list of distinguished people on that list.
Get that cat in town. Former GM.
Former GM to the team. So thank you, Rich, for being here today. And Pam Everhart, who will join us after Rich's presentation. Many important roles here with the Chamber and in the Massachusetts community. Pam is a person very giving of herself and her time and her expertise and knowledge, including serving on the Massachusetts Board of Directors, and has been tapped on the shoulder several times by governors, including the current governor, to serve on special committees and task forces, going back to COVID, and the COVID task force that then Governor Baker set up, but now Governor Haley asked Pam to sit on the advisory council of Black Empowerment to advise on issues of economic prosperity. In her day job, beyond all of the activities on behalf of the people of the Commonwealth, at Fidelity, Pam's the head of regional public affairs, inclusion and impact, overseeing the firm's state and local government relationships, and she's responsible for the global D&I strategy, community relations, social impact initiatives. And of course, here at the Chamber, Pam is a Pinnacle honoree, which I know is the most distinguished award she's ever received, and co-chair of our Public Policy Leadership Council, which is a gathering of all people in our community and membership that are involved in government affairs and public policy. So we're very grateful for Pam's willingness to join us in this conversation as well. So as I said, the way this will work is we'll invite Rich up to the podium to give an update and an overview of what's going on in Massport and the airport, and then Pam and I will join him for some conversation and get your questions ready, because at the end we'll have time for Q&A with Rich or Pam. So again, no questions for me. So Rich, come on up. Please join me in welcoming Rich Davey.
Thank you, Jim. First of all, we've been able to collaborate, inspire, some might say, over the years on a bunch of stuff. And I was making a joke, you can't swing a dead cat. I love cats, but I have too. And not did a former general manager or former secretary of transportation, by the way, in town, an illustrious group, but appreciate your leadership. I usually start these with the jokes and fanfare, but I do want to just take a moment and just acknowledge, obviously, what happened in India. I've learned in this job that I'm incredibly fortunate to work with a group of professionals, both at Massport and the airlines, but these tragedies and moments are pretty significant. So I know we'll obviously watch and see what, and hopefully learn from what occurred there, but I just wanted to start with acknowledging that tragedy occurred earlier yesterday. Let's talk about Massport. And I guess I've been here about 10 months now. I had the great joy of, when I served as Transportation Secretary, of being the board chair 10 years ago. And so it is not an unfamiliar place to me. But over the last 10 years, they've achieved some extraordinary things. And over the next 10 years and beyond, we hope to build upon that as a team. So who are we? Just sort of level setting very quickly. I think when I took this job, my mother was like, "Oh, you're going to run the airport." I said, "Yes, Mom, I'm going to run the airport." But it's more than just that. Logan Airport, Hanscom Field, and I was telling the former chairman of transportation, Steve Dorr, was here, that in 2009 during transportation reform, I noticed they closed the shades, by the way, so I couldn't point out that they stole the Tobin Bridge from Massport and gave it, Moneymaker, by the way, gave it to MassDOT. And also, as part of that, we took over the Worcester Airport, which actually worked out incredibly well. We'll talk a little about that. Maritime, Conley Terminal, we'll talk about that. The cruise port, of course. Seafood. I was actually visiting the CEO of Boston Sword and Tuna yesterday, which is like a fascinating tour. And he said, if you were to describe Logan Airport as the biggest fishing port in the East Coast, you wouldn't be wrong. There's so much fish. In fact, anything that you might eat tonight at a restaurant or at home probably flew through, not in first class, but probably flew through Logan Airport. And then, of course, real estate. We'll talk a little bit about that as well. South Boston, East Boston, and Charlestown. Over $22 billion in economic impact for the Commonwealth, and we are only 1,400 employees. We also have over 107 direct jobs that we impact, of course. There are 22,000 people that work at Logan Airport, to give you a sense of the economic impact. But we really punch above our weight, and I'm proud of it as a team. If you remember nothing of this talk today, 2024 was a record-breaking, and it had it all to do with me. I'm kidding. It was a record-breaking year. Logan served the highest number of passengers in our history, 43.5 million. Worcester in the highest in the last 35 years, almost 230,000 folks. And Flynn Cruise Port, over 480,000, our highest ever. Very proud of that. Does anyone know what the biggest cruising month is in Boston? October. Leaf peeping is a big thing for us and our Canadian friends, actually. So really interesting to say the least. We're serving the most nonstop international destination in our history. Now almost 59, as you can see. And a lot of reasons for that. This is an attractive market for sure. Aviation technology's improved dramatically in the last decade and a half. And we've made significant investments. Hopefully you've been through the new Terminal E, pretty cool. A lot of good stuff happening at the airport. And then just a couple of highlights in terms of real estate that I wanted to mention. 10 World Trade Center, be coming online a little later this year. It's a really cool building. I had a chance to tour that a couple of months ago. They're actually, the top floor, by the way, is going to be a gym. I guess how I said that. Nice. Yeah. And they have a whole track that you can run around the top inside the building. I mean, it's really cool. A lot of great public amenity space. Super excited what they've done. And then Commonwealth Pier, one of our most important tenants, Fidelity, will be moving in there back in mid-2026. They've done a spectacular job, not only of building just a beautiful place for their employees to be, but they've expanded public space, public realm. We've got a couple cool restaurants coming. It should continue to enliven, I think over 2,000 Fidelity employees will be back in that neighborhood next year. Continue to enliven that neighborhood. So a deep dive on Logan very quickly. As I mentioned, 43.5 million folks that we served last year, customers, yes. And as I said, over 20,000 employees, most of whom are airlines, contractors, TSA, who are serving those folks safely every day. Some say, well, the airport's grown, right? Hasn't it grown? Has there been more, aircraft operations and whatnot? In fact, it's actually the opposite. While passenger growth, as you can see here, has gone up by 57% over the last 25 years, aircraft operations are down. And so, it's important for us to continue to be a good neighbor for East Boston, for South Boston, Winthrop, and the other communities that we are around. But just wanted to level set that. This is one stat I think folks don't realize, is that in fact the operations have decreased while aviation has become proficient. We also punch above our weight. You can fit, I think the math is on there. I was a lawyer, I'm a lawyer, so I'm not a mathematician. I do very well math. You can fit about 14 Logan airports within the size of Denver Airport. So when you talk about us, and we've got some challenges there, but being able to manage that kind of footprint, imagine that. So you get all the sense here, but Logan, as a matter of just size, comparatively to some of these other major airports, is quite small. The other thing that is really interesting is, Brian Keene's here from the MBTA Advisory Board, and a lot of folks I think do know, but there are 15 transit systems in Massachusetts and the MBTA. If we were a transit system, we would be the 5th largest in Massachusetts. Our Logan Express carried over 2.5 million people last year, which was also a new record from Framingham, Braintree, Woburn, Danvers, and our Back Bay Logan Express, which we are working with Marcel and the team at the Convention Center to improve, which we're excited about. But obviously, we don't have an airside problem at Logan Airport. We've got plenty of runways, gates. We have opportunity to continue to be flexible. It's, as you all know, getting to the airport is the biggest challenge. And so we also were proud to say that 43% of our customers last year arrived in HOV. What did that mean? That means they weren't driving alone or were not being dropped off alone. They were on a bus, they were on a private bus, they took the T, they took a ride share, they took a shuttle bus, they took something other than a single occupancy vehicle. And 22% of our customers arrived in the T, Logan Express, private bus. That was also a record. And this is not by happenstance or chance. This has been a concerted effort by the Massport team over the last several years to invest in public transit with the T, with our own Logan Express, and with our private bus And we're continuing to invest. We're doubling our capacity at Framingham Logan Express. It's under construction today. That'll be open Halloween. Now, I've been in government long enough to ask, which Halloween? Is it this Halloween, next Halloween, 2027, and will be this Halloween? We're expanding our North Shore, as we mentioned. We moved to Danvers earlier last year. We have a new traffic czar, something I'm obsessed with, which is improving the traffic around the roadway. So there's a designated person now whose sole responsibility is to run around like a maniac and make sure that we're making improvements. And we're exploring the concept of a remote terminal. So I want to spend just a minute on this because I think this is cool. I just got a briefing today on this. So the idea being, and that not really anyone in the United States does this, but that you would be able to, at a location, say in Braintree or Framingham or somewhere else, that you would be able to park or get dropped off, go through TSA security, check your bag, get on a sterile bus, and then be dropped off on the sterile side of the airport. So you wouldn't have to go through TSA and wait here. You would have already gone through. My hope is that we will be piloting this concept sometime next year. I'm not sure when, I'm not sure where, but we challenged the team to see if we could start to build momentum here in the Boston area. And if we can, then we will start to look to do this permanently. When you talk again about the constraints that we have at the airport, getting there is the constraint. If we can get more people in the same vehicles, we'll be able to address the traffic issues, obviously the 2 tunnel constraints that we have. So more to come on this, but we're excited. We've done some passenger surveys. People are really interested. Getting 75% of Bostonians to agree to anything is a bit of a stretch, but folks are saying that they would do this. In fact, they would even pay more, although that's not where we're headed quite yet. We also had my friends here from Lyft. I say we had a pillow fight with our friends at Uber and Lyft early in the year, right, Pam? Pam, you took the vote, thank you, which was to increase a number of fees around the airport to continue to encourage our customers to take rideshare or HOV to the airport. And we came to an agreement with Uber and Lyft. We are actually looking to turn back on the rideshare products for both of the companies. So right now, or at least back a few months ago, you couldn't share a ride to or from Logan Airport. That is changing as a result of the agreement that we reached with Uber and Lyft, and I do want to thank them for that work. We're also looking at smart match programs. Candidly, when I was preparing for this, I was like, what the hell is that? Well, the answer is rather than saying, hey, you're looking for that black SUV or the license plate, blah, 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 you'll actually have a designated parking spot. Go to parking spot 21, your car will be there. So, and our extended rematch window is making sure that Uber or Lyft, when they drop somebody off at the airport, isn't leaving empty, that we're matching them with a customer as well. So again, all about reducing the traffic at the airport. I would love, when the comment period in particular, how many of you have flown through Logan in the last year? Exactly. No doubt you will have some feedback for us, which I will be loved to hear. But we are very much focused on the customer experience at Logan Airport, and while I think it is a good airport, I think we can be better. We can always be better, regardless of what we're doing. So we've been focused on safe, clean, calming, and accessible facilities as one, courteous staff, seamless and intuitive transportation, as I mentioned already, uniquely tailored concessions, I'll talk a little bit about that, and then just generally surprising delight. What can we be doing to encourage our customers to be having a great experience at Logan in particular? And then we'll scale this across the properties, by the way, not just Logan. It's hard to see, it's a little weak sign, but I've also been obsessed with giving information to our customers. Where should you park? Should it be number 2? Should it be this garage, etc.? We're improving that. We're improving our wayfinding around Logan. I saw a sign last week that said, enter, do not enter. I was like, right? So we can do better here, and we're working on that as well. I actually got a briefing today on this, and we've got some really big plans to improve our wayfinding and our signage. Live music. Now, one of the top 5 customer complaints, baggage. Takes too long to get my bags. Now, 2 things here. One is, we actually, so I don't know if you land at Dallas or LaGuardia or Houston or wherever, and it takes you half a day to get from your gate to the baggage claim. Those are designed on purpose, by the way, just so you know. But at Logan, for the most part, you can get from your gate to baggage claim more quickly than anywhere else in America. So the perception is our baggage claim is slow. Now, sometimes it can be, by the way, and we're working with our airline partners on that. But how can we make sure that we're keeping folks entertained or amused, perhaps, in baggage claim? We're going to start some live music and see if that works. Restrooms. I'm kind of obsessed with restrooms. We're picking the 10 worst restrooms at the store at Logan Airport. Steve's like, what's he talking about? It's true. It's one of the top 5 complaints when I started was, restroom cleanliness. And so it's not only cleanliness, but it's also a capital improvement program. Chick-fil-A and Shake Shack. So Shake Shack opened back in December. It's doing gangbusters for business. That's great for customers. It's good for us, by the way, because we get a piece of all of those sales. And Chick-fil-A will be coming in the fall of 2025 in Terminal A, and next year in Terminal E. Yes, they will not be open on Sunday, but I'll tell you right now, if you look at how much sales they do, that's fine. They're one of the most successful franchises in every American airport. Sorry. And then we continue to look at other improvements across the airport. So A and B security would be the last post-security connector. Right now, if you go through TSA, you cannot connect between terminals A and B. That will change. That construction project will start soon. We're building a new parking garage at Terminal E. That was supposed to be online already, but it was deferred as a result of COVID. Baggage claim improvements, Terminal C improvements. We have a lot going on. So with my mother would say, isn't Logan Airport always under construction? And the answer is, it is. We're actually constantly improving. Hopefully not to interrupt you, but certainly we're constantly improving. We're also doubling down on our fight against climate change, and I want to skip ahead. Well, actually, I don't want to skip ahead. So among other things, we created a new office and hired a new chief of climate resiliency who's here. Jill, raise your hand, wave to everybody. Jill Valdez-Harwood, we stole from the Bar Foundation. We're delighted to have her on our team to challenge us to continue to meet our net zero by 2031 goal, which is what we have. And we've also been focused on sustainable aviation fuel. And so while we are doing all that you would be doing as an owner of an airport, changing the light bulbs and going to electric vehicles and all that, 90% of the greenhouse gas emissions from Logan Airport or thereabouts is aviation fuel. Like that is the existential challenge for aviation globally. 2 to 4% of all greenhouse gas emissions globally come from aviation fuel. And so a group of us got together across the administration, 4 cabinet secretaries, the climate chief, Clean Energy Center, and delivered to the governor last week a report on how we think we can make sustainability, Massachusetts and New England, a hub for the development, the scale, the pilot, and ultimate the use of sustainable aviation fuel. Why not? So it's not only a play for our greenhouse gas emissions and improving and fighting climate change, but we also think it's a play for economic development. So planning for the future. We just hired BCG a few weeks back to help us with our 10-year strategic plan. So the last time we had a strategic plan was in 2014 when I was board chair. Tom Lynn was running Massport, and as a result of a few things, including COVID, we haven't sort of put a stake in the ground where the entire operation should be in 2035. And we expect lots of things to be changing in our business over those next 10 years, whether it's climate change, as I mentioned, to economic development, the blue tech economy, what's the future of aviation, what's the future of the maritime business. And so getting ahead of that and mapping out a strategic plan for the next decade is going to be part of what we do, frankly, with Pam and the rest of her colleagues on the board. We're excited about that to chart our future. We've also had a strong financial performance. Now, I have to tell you, I've run the T, I've run MassDOT, I ran New York City Transit, I was a commuter rail. I have not made any money at all in any of those organizations that I've ever run. But Massport is self-funded. And we derive our revenues from a whole host of areas, whether it's parking, user fees, concessions. We have a $3.8 billion 5-year capital plan, our largest ever. And today, literally, our board voted for our fiscal year 26 budget. But what we reported in that is that our margin this past year was the highest ever, which allows us to pay down our debt service and continue to invest in capital programs. We also have a significant improved bond rating as well. So that is the sort of lay of the land, if you will. I would say this, I'm happy to be home, no doubt. I've made this joke. In 2 years in New York, there were no championship parades. And I had been, had the opportunity to plan some of those championship parades back in the day, right, Tom Tillman? You did too. So I'm really excited to be back. I'm really excited to get your feedback, if you will, on how we can improve our operations. And with that, Jim, I think we'll come on up.
Conversation. All right, let's do it. You ready, Pam?
Yeah.
As we're getting settled here, my first reaction is I think I like your mother. All those things that she says to you, I think is spot on.
The other one I'll tell you, it's really funny, is like, when I became GM of the team,
Yeah.
she gave me a clock with a quote on it that said, "You're only as good as your last question." My mother's judging me twice a day.
Yeah, there you go. As we've said, we've known each other for a long time. We've collaborated, schemed over the years on many things, and knowing Rich's idea, and I think this came from this presentation, we're fortunate to have a person of his caliber as a manager and leader running an organization like Massport. So thank you for that, Rich. But we've really been blessed thinking back to Lisa Whelan and Tom Glenn and Tom Kenton to have a long string of strong leadership at Massport that served us well in the position we're in.
I do want to call it Dave Mackey as well, who's an interim CEO and the GC for a long time. So there's a lot of leadership behind the CEOs too, but I agree, Lisa and Tom were top notch.
So Pam, why don't we give Rich a rest for a minute, and I'll start with you. You've been on the board now about a year?
Yes.
Right? And so, you're a traveler, your colleagues at Fidelity, I'm sure, on the planes a lot and traveling quite a bit. And I'm sure that during all of that and your personal experiences, you had a perception of air travel and Logan Airport, and now you've been inside for a year. Talk about the differences, talk about the perceptions you might have had, and sort of now that you're kind of in the game a little bit. So what surprised you? What have you learned?
Well, thank you for being here. It's been great getting to know Rich and being a year on the board. I will say, when I first came on, I didn't really know a lot about airport operations. I just knew that you get on the plane and how you get there, and that's about it, right? But now I understand the importance of the customer satisfaction. And I can't think of one board meeting, Rich, where you have not started off with the importance yeah. I don't think I know one meeting where you haven't started off with customer satisfaction. And even in the presentation, you went through a lot of the improvements that we're focused on. And I would say, as I'm going through different airports, there's some things I like and there's some things I don't. But I will say this, at Logan, I think it's so easy to get through the airport. It's compact. The screening process is really easy. And I'll tell you, international travel, I came back from Dubai. I think I may have mentioned this to you about a couple of months ago. And I think from the time I landed at the airport to my Uber, I think it took me no more than 20 minutes. Now, I didn't have to go through baggage. I didn't have to do that because I never check baggage anymore. I've learned. But it was, I just don't, especially international travel. If I don't have it in my bag, I'll have to buy it when I get there.
You're gonna miss the music.
Right, I'm gonna miss the music. But I'll say, and it's not complicated. I mean, for those of you who've gone through DFW and some of those larger airports, just trying to get around. So I want to say that it's very efficient. But there's always improvement, right? And as you mentioned, that transportation thing, that's my favorite topic. I know that's yours as well. But we're working on it. And you have a plan, so part of the strategic plan, and I think we have a really good solution to get there. The other thing is that it's a large ecosystem. You know, it's not just the airport, it's not just the runways, But it's the airport controllers, we all know that, the people on the ground doing a lot of things, the customer service reps, the TSA, border security, a lot of different moving parts. It's a huge ecosystem when you're thinking about running a really efficient and smart airport that really gets people to and from where they need to go. So it's been a great experience, a great learning experience, and as I mentioned, I think it's not because I'm from Boston, but I really do think it's one of the best. We're not number one yet, because you're gonna be graded on that in terms of J.D. Power, right? But I think we're doing really, really well.
Hey, Rich, pick up on that ecosystem. Everyone probably thinks that you're responsible for baggage claim, check-in, security, food on the airplane, everything. Talk about all the players involved in the complexity of your role and your team's role in managing an organization when you don't have direct control over everything that relates to the experience.
Yeah, so maybe one way to describe it is Ed Freddy, our longtime director of aviation, who's been at Massport for 23 to 24 years, and before that was at American Airlines, so he's an industry veteran. And some of you know that one of the pieces of our DNA is that 9/11, 2 of the planes left from Logan Airport. And since that day until this morning, Ed convenes a meeting of all the airline and airport stakeholders, I should say, 8:30, to talk about stuff, whatever that stuff could be. It could be as simple as, hey, reminder, the Blue Line is shut down, this week, and you think through that, to security matters. And in that room, Jim, are, 50, 100 people on the phone in the room, and maybe 15 of them work for us at Massport. The rest are airlines, our federal partners, concessionaires, ABM, the cleaning company. You just go down the list of folks. So with only 1,400 total Massport employees across the organization, we have over 20,000 people that work at the airport. As you said, catering trucks, mechanics, and it's obviously we have a fire. About 10% of our employees are actually firefighters. We have our own firefighting apparatus, obviously, and today was able to help. We had a minor issue, thank goodness, with JetBlue, but we're there to help with that JetBlue flight. So it does take a village to manage what is a very complex. And then, I think we're going to talk about FAA too. In some of the challenges that FAA has. When you talk about professional individuals who show up and really work hard every day and care, those air traffic controllers in our tower are spectacular.
So, Rich, you mentioned in your presentation 2 of the top 5 complaints.
Yes.
And the jobs you've had and I've had, you develop leather skin, so
Yes.
you're okay with the complaints. So baggage handling and bathrooms. Fill in the top 5
Yes.
complaints you get.
Yes. So how many people think traffic is in the top 5? Anyone?
Yeah.
It's actually not. Now, that was a bit of the impression when I arrived, but traffic is nothing we can do. Well, it turns out if you look at the customer service data, I forget the order, but baggage claim time was 1, bathroom cleanliness is another, Wi-Fi speed is another, although we have quietly doubled that speed. I guess we have an announcement now announcing it. In the past, sorry, Jen Egan's here from our media relations, she's like, rolling her eyes, there we go.
There's only 5 reporters. This room can keep a secret.
Wayfinding, as you know, we're working on that as well, sort of signage around the airport. The parking signage in particular is something that we're working on. And then the last one was concessions, the concession prices actually. Now that's interesting because that's usually one of the top complaints for every airport in America. And so, if you want to go to one of our establishments and have a $30 glass of wine, you can, but I think we're also looking to bring in like a Chick-fil-A and some others where you've got quick service that has more, say, family-friendly pricing. But the reality is, it's interesting, like just the stocking and then getting the concessions into the airport, it does cost money for our concessionaires. So, but that is a complaint we hear, but it is literally the top, most uniform complaint for every airport in America.
I want to shift, and maybe both of you can weigh in on this. new dynamics coming out of the federal government that are affecting everybody. So generally, and I'm sure they raised the board level of conversation around the federal impact on operations of an airport and what's going on. So what are the impacts of the current administration policies and so forth? The one that I think we most read about is those that affect international travelers in the processing through, not just Logan Airport, but any airport. So maybe the operational impacts, and Dan, if you'd like to add in, what other kinds of things, given the dynamics of what's happening in Washington, is an organization like Massport kind of confront?
Sure. Well, maybe I'll start with the air traffic control question, right? Because that has really, folks have read it or experienced it, particularly in the Newark airspace. And that's not the current administration's fault, right? That's actually the fault of several administrations and lots of Congresses over the years who have allowed almost every tower in America to be understaffed. I think it's like 90% of all towers in the United States are understaffed. That is a huge challenge, right? That is not a it's a Democratic Republican pothole. It's like there's not a Democratic or Republican air traffic control. Like you're up in the air, you want to land safely. Now it's not unsafe, but what happens is if they're understaffed, like at Newark, fewer planes take off and fewer planes land, and as a result, you see delays. So I think that's a very tangible one. I will give the Trump administration credit; they are pushing hard to hire. They've cleared a bunch of bureaucracy. There's a mandatory retirement age at 57 right now for air traffic controllers. They've increased that by a couple of years now to retain talent. So I do think, and now there are other challenges clearly. The uncertainty with tariffs and some of the challenges we see in Conley Terminal. We've sort of been up and down and all around. Some weeks no ships. In the last couple of weeks we've had a lot of ships. So that uncertainty hasn't been helpful. But I think those are a couple of areas we're watching right now. But I think given as we recall the crash that occurred at Reagan National back in January has really heightened again, and I think made aviation safety and security more bipartisan perhaps than it might have been. So I haven't seen huge effects yet, but we're watching closely.
Just a quick follow-up. One in the air traffic control, you mentioned staffing. We had Joanna Gary, the CEO of JetBlue, speak to the chamber a couple months ago. She also mentioned the technology. And the other one I would ask is, are you noticing throughput issues with international travelers?
Yeah, I'm reminded of the movie Airplane, when they're like playing Pong, and it's the radar system, and it's not quite that antiquated, but it's pretty close. We have an antiquated radar system across America, it's not Boston. Some of that cable is still like little copper cable, right? It's not fiber. So again, it's like decades of no investment whatsoever. So there's going to be, and I don't know how they're going to pay for it. It's going to be through FAA fees or eventually, passed on to our tickets through flying. But it seems to be a good investment. But that's a huge one. On the question of international travel, I would say this: so we haven't seen a softening yet of international travel, with the exception of Canada. We've seen a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit of Canadian air travel retreat in the last, I would say, 6 to 8 weeks. The airlines are being, I would say, cautious about their projections. We think that certainly through the summer, what they're telling us is things should be reasonably stable, but the fall and beyond is a bit harder to anticipate. But so far, we've seen stable traffic, with the exception of Canada. We've seen a little softening there.
So, board, let's talk about what the board's talking about. So, either these federal issues, or Rich mentioned a strategic planning process that I'm sure the board is checking. What is going on at the board level of Massport?
Sure. We did kick off our 10-year strategic planning process this month, and then we'll have a deeper dive, I think, sometime next month. But some of the main things, once again, customer satisfaction is always key. We talked about that. And then just planning for growth. We're at 43 million passengers over the next 10 years. We're talking about 53 million. So what all does that involve? Obviously, we don't want a lot of frustration by our passengers, so how do we manage all of that and all of the infrastructure changes? Communities. as we expand and make changes, we always want to make sure that we are a good community partner and engaging with the communities around the airport. Innovation is a big piece, you're a big component of that. Using data, we all do that in our everyday business. You don't make any decisions without using data. And then, we're all of us who work for big companies always look for talent, the best and the brightest. And I think looking at Massport as an employer of choice is really important in making sure that we have students that come in that are educated, that are interested in aviation and maritime. So I would think those are some of the key things that we're looking at from a board perspective. And then just always planning for the unexpected, right? Is there gonna be a crisis? That saying, don't let a good crisis go to waste. So as we see things happening in other places, how do we prepare? What is the scenario planning? We've done a lot of that and reviewed a lot of plans from staff that come to the board to make sure that we're prepared for whatever happens.
Let's follow up on that. You both have emphasized the customer experience, and Pam brought up innovation, technology, data. Talk about the ways you're thinking about that. Talk about the ways that as you look into the future maybe a little bit. How might those applications change the customer experience, or the way you conduct business?
Yeah, I mean, I think up until last year, I think we were still taking cash at our Logan Express sites, for example. Like there are some real big, I think we're Amir, who's our new chief strategy officer. Amir, wave everybody. There you go, Amir, former colleague of mine at BCG. Waging a war on cash, I think was the phrase you used the other day, which I love, and now it's been announced. So I think that's sort of those kind of basic tenets, Jim, for sure. Trying to get our traffic czars some better data so we can manage more real time our curbs around Logan Airport, for example, is something else that we're looking to do. I think where we excel is our capital development team, our capital programs team, headed by Luciana Birdie. We really manage projects through data and information. We're managing the airport's footprint in that regard as well. And so of all the places I've been that are asset intensive, I think we've got a really good handle on using data, the sort of condition of assets. And again, you know that that's critically important in any kind of a asset intensive infrastructure organization. So I think those are a few places. Back to the customer service data, I'm not sure we were probably mining that as much as we could have. And so we're doing that now. We have surveys out frequently to see what customers are telling us and saying to us, and then working with our concession air as well to say, what are people buying? What are people not buying? What products and services should we be offering? So I think, that. And then finally, is the question in the future, which I think we'll probably really engage with the board on, is the question of AI and the question of safety and also the question of privacy, right? There's this balance we need to strike, particularly as a quasi-public, to utilize data, but in a way that is not otherwise abusing, a customer's, personal information, for example. So I think all those questions will be talked about in the coming months.
I want to expand the conversation. You mentioned the tremendous number, I forget what it is, of the capital investment plan.
Almost $4 billion.
$4 billion. I'm imagining you highlighted some projects at Logan Airport, but I'm imagining that's spread out a little bit. So I'd like you to talk a little bit about that. But in the context of the, New England regional airport systems, and, Worcester Airport, of course, but there's Providence, there's Manchester. What level of coordination, and as you're doing strategic planning, how do you think about the interrelatedness of all of those airports? I'm sure there's competitiveness, but I'm sure also you're not all that bothered sometimes when people go to one of the other airports. I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, I think so. I think my observation is we could coordinate a little better. I mean, notwithstanding that Manchester is now called Manchester Boston Regional Airport, I think. That's true, actually. But I think the sustainable aviation fuel gave us an opportunity to engage with the regional airports in the last couple of weeks about, that's not a competitive approach. That's really trying to propel the region to be a leader. but also, but look, you know, we saw the constraints, the lane constraints at Logan. At some point, someday, probably not during my tenure, you know, there are constraints about what Logan can do. And so having a more regional approach, whether that be Worcester or whether that be, you know, other airports outside of Boston, is important. But as you well know, you know, for example, the state worked with 10 years ago to bring commuter rail to T.F. Green Airport, right? So folks can jump on, you know, a train in Massachusetts and get to T.F. Green Airport. We shouldn't see that as a competitor, I would think. Lastly is, you know, the question of aviation in the future, next, you know, 10, 20, 30, 40 years. You know, does Logan become a more long-haul airport, as an example? Do more people take a better Acela train to New York? EVIL is another question, you know, sort of vertical landing and takeoff. What does that look like? Could you be flying from Braintree to Burlington, Vermont? I don't know. But I think there's a lot of questions, and I think the Logan of today is probably not the Logan of tomorrow.
What about the other things you might add?
The other elements of the capital investment plan outside of Logan that you might call out?
Yeah, I mean, I think one area where we've really underinvested in the last few years is the Flynn Cruise Port. And so as we've seen cruise coming back, like, you know, crazy from COVID, you know, we think cruise is a good bet for Boston, for the region. And so we're investing about $110 million into the Flynn Cruise Port, not only to improve passenger amenities, but also to make it more green, i.e., you know, today when a cruise ship of 4,000 people shows up and it needs to stay power and they're, you know, cooking food or keeping the bar or whatever they're doing, the pool warm, you know, it's a diesel engine that's spewing diesel fumes in the air, and, you know, in particular for South Boston. And so we committed to being the first port in New England to have ground shore power. So basically, when the boat comes in, it's plugged in, and you no longer have that greenhouse gas emission. So, you know, those are the kinds of investments we're making beyond Logan Airport. Obviously, Worcester, we continue to make capital investments. We have 5 flights now there a day. We'd love to see more. And, you know, we continue to make our net zero gains as well. I mean, that's not an inexpensive proposition for us to get to net zero by 2031. So we've got work to do there.
So, I want to shift to community types of conversations. And Pam, if I could start with you. We're blessed that our sponsor, State Street Fidelity, led by you, are very community conscious. Think about their roles and responsibilities in the region, and how they play a positive and impactful role in what Boston and the region is all about. So we're blessed with that. Talk about now applying that thought process, and, you know, certainly I'm sure it wasn't out with Rich, but applying that process to sort of the role of the airport in our broader community. And Rich didn't mention it, but I'm sure that noise complaints of planes flying overhead, probably not airport experience complaints. It's more probably neighborhood complaints. But on the other hand, there's a lot of examples in East Boston, South Boston. You know, Pierce Park too, a unique example of Massport investing. Talk about that dimension of it, particularly given the proximity of Logan to so many residential neighborhoods. Unlike Denver, I mean, they can do whatever they want. But you know, you're in Boston, you're in the city. There's not many airports like that. Talk about that challenge and the thought process that maybe you bring to the table about how Massport approaches that.
Sure. Well, engagement in the community is something that is I hold close to my heart, and it's so important in any organization that I've ever been involved in. It's been important to me that they think about engaging in the community. Think about how you listen to folks and you learn. You just don't come in with what you think are the solutions, but you actually co-create something. So Pierce Park 2 is a great example of where Massport engaged the community, actually in the design of the park, and turned a gravel lot into a really nice green space. And it's a place where folks from all different backgrounds, the diversity part, the inclusive part, also, which is very important to me. So I wanted to commend Massport and the whole team that really took a thoughtful approach of doing that. And to me, it says that it wasn't just about the infrastructure and the construction and everything at the airport, but it was really about how this is going to impact the people around the airport, and to really view that they're a partner, a very strategic, close partner into everything we do. So it's part of our strategic plan as well, as we continue to grow and expand, but also take into consideration what the concerns are.
So you both brought up some workforce issues there, Massport. I'd like to hear a little bit more about workforce and talent challenges at Massport, certainly for the talent that you need, but also in the industry. I mean, what are you hearing from the airlines, from TSA, air traffic control, everything that goes into all of this? What are the challenges, workforce challenges that the whole enterprise is facing today, and what are people doing?
Yeah, and certainly one of our 7 priorities is, as Pam mentioned, being an employer of choice. And I think Massport's history has been able to do that. And we did an employee survey, I think 6 months ago now, and we had, I think it was a 60% response rate, and over 80% of our employees said that they liked or loved working at Massport. It was a mission-driven organization. Now, we have challenges, but I would offer that there are probably a lot of big private sector companies who would love to start off with that as a place with their people, that they're mission-driven, they're focused. So I think a couple things. I mean, certainly just broadly speaking, STEM education is something that you and others have been working on is critical. And we actually hosted about 200 students last week for a STEM expo at the Delta hangar, which is cool, for both not only aviation but maritime. We had the airline. By the way, of these 2,200 students, about 50% had never been on a plane. Never. And they're sitting, by the way, in a cockpit of a JetBlue flight with all female pilots, by the way, cool, talking about avionics and aviation, and how math and science, Suffolk Construction, for example, had their robotic dog. I'm convinced John Fish has robotic pets at home. Sorry, John, you're on. Right, Erin? She's like, exactly. But seeing the students engaged with that, I mean, they were eyes wide open. We had flight simulators and a crane simulator, and I told somebody that, I think in the last 2 weeks, it's been the best 2 weeks I've seen at Massport. We gave out 7 STEM scholarships to really great kids from East Boston and Charlestown. We hosted 2,200 at the STEM Expo. We're pretty undercover about this stuff. We do a lot about, pushing for the next generation to get you engaged, whatever that is. But we're blessed to have a great workforce at Massport. We continue to push, to hire, to promote. We've got work to do. The new chair of our committee for HR, sitting to my right, is going to be engaged, who was voted today as our new chair of HR. So continue to make sure we're offering our employees a strong value proposition. But also, as you said, I mean, I'm in my 50s now. I'm starting to look around saying, who's taking over? Because I'm ready to I'm ready to retire, man. Like, I got a golf game to improve. But
plenty left on the time.
But we gotta cultivate that next generation.
My friend from Waycare just caught my eye, and we didn't talk about movement of products, either through the airport or the terminal, surely. But there's a lot of product gets moved out of Logan Airport as well. Talk about that dimension.
Sure. So I'll pass that, and we were neighbors for a couple of years. I'm glad you're not a neighbor anymore, because you'd grab me all the time probably with distribution challenges. No. In all seriousness, a few things. I mean, so Conley Terminal moves about 140,000-ish TEUs this year. Home furnishings, products, without getting into who our top clients are, there may be one here in the room. I also would say too that if you have a Barolo or a Chateauneuf de Pape at home, it probably came through Conley Terminal as well. And so it's, we're not the largest port on the East Coast, but we're critically important to, sort of household companies, furniture, apparel, goods that you would know. And I don't think the Kraft family would be upset, but they are our largest exporter. Dan Kraft, who runs the paper and pulp company, is one of our most important customers as well. So, in part, it's as much a sort of private sector business mindset we have. And thanks to my predecessors and the predecessor board and the federal government and the state, a massive investment was made to dredge the harbor. You were part of that. And put new cranes in, and as a result, we're actually now taking the largest ships we've ever taken because we can accommodate them with all the investment that was made.
What about at the airport, the FedEx, the UPS, all that? Is
Yeah.
that growing? Is that what's happening?
So interesting, so that is growing, but what's more interesting, I would say, is that there's actually not an insignificant number of commercial flights that are made possible because of the cargo in the belly of the plane. And so fish, for example, as I said, I made the joke, they're not flying first class, but there's a lot of fish probably on your plane if you're flying to Europe, for example, or from Europe. But cargo is not an insignificant part of our portfolio. Everyone's laughing, but maybe the fish are first class, I don't know. Exactly. So yes, Charlie was the name. So anyway, but there's a lot of cargo, to your point, Jim, that only comes from the port, but also local as well.
All right. I'm getting a signal that I gotta open it up to the audience, so I have plenty more, but anyone wanna jump in? Okay, we got it down the back.
Hey, good afternoon, Brendan Joyce. Yeah, absolutely, good to see you. Brendan Joyce with Lyft. Thanks to all three of you for this great discussion. Rich, I have a very important question for you. Are you performing live this summer at Baggage Queen? And if so, originals or covers?
So if we want customer satisfaction to improve, no, I will not be.
Fair enough.
As I say, I was an altar boy, not a choir boy growing up, so I did that.
Oh, right here. And then we'll go over there.
My name is Elena Stinson. Thank you so much for that presentation. I'm very curious about, you mentioned the customer experience, and you mentioned like the top 5 complaints, and you guys are going to be focusing on that customer experience and creating a uniquely tailored concession. I just wanted to hear what your strategies are in that space.
Yeah, sure. So I think what we've asked, and I think the team has done a pretty good job over the last few years, but I think what Logan used to be was very sort of national, big box, without naming names, large brands, and not focus on a mix of both that, which is important, but also local brands, right? Local entrepreneurs, local restaurants. So for example, again, I can't take credit for what's been there one time, but the Boston Public Market outlet, for example, Berkshire Farmers Market, I think we have 2 now of those in our building as well. And so making sure that we've got sort of local known brands mixed with those national. And we're still trying to figure that out. I don't think we've got it quite right. The number one, it's not gonna shock you, the number one commodity or the number one thing purchased at Logan Airport is a bottle of water. So we need to continue to offer the most basic amenities. But at the same time, we've also heard from our customer surveys that they do want some more healthy options, for example, for food, or more bespoke options. And so we're gonna try to strike that balance. But that's the strategy. So kind of look at the national brands like Shake Shack and Chick-fil-A with a couple other locals that I don't want to call out because we're still in conversations with them, but let's just say maybe some familiar local brands as well.
Like I said, no one will pass that up. This one is very secret. Do we have a question down
Thank you so much, Colin DeLaPierre, Bank of America. We're one of Massport's largest bondholders, so I appreciate your stewardship of the credit and our
Double A, you bring that back to Brian Moynihan, it's still double A, right?
Yes, sir. I'm curious, given the tariff situation increasing the building costs and the airlines starting to struggle with their own profitability with the softening of the economy, have you encountered any pushback for their signing up to pay for these significant capital improvements, and particularly given the short-term commitment that they provide versus some of the peer employees?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So, we literally had this conversation at the board today among other things, in our budget for fiscal '26, which we didn't freeze, we chilled, which is to say, we've taken sort of a prudent but not panicky approach to next year, was also built in there are rates and charges, so all the rates and charges that we pass on to the airlines. It's a very open and transparent process. It's very highly regulated by the FAA. The airlines were, I think, generally pleased with what we talked about in terms of our cost constraints. But as activity goes up, which will be good for everybody, costs will certainly go up as we add more services. But we're very mindful of that. But the good news is some of those airlines that you mentioned that might have been maybe struggling a little bit with some of their financial performance are really doubling down in this Boston market. So, for example, JetBlue, they will tell you, Joanna did a couple months ago, they haven't turned a profit in 5 years, 6 years. They're working on a number of things to improve the airline, but they are laser focused on improving this market in Boston. Delta, which has been doing well, continues to invest in Boston as well. So we haven't heard any pushback, and in fact, I think the airlines know very acutely that the number one challenge we have over here, if we don't continue to invest in it, is the ground transportation question. And I will tell you, we have brought to the airlines our idea of a remote terminal, for example. They are really excited because they could see this as yet another amenity they could potentially offer as part of the overall Boston offering for folks that live outside of the city. So we've got great partnerships with them, but we see ourselves as a partner in making sure we're keeping our costs as in line and as tight as possible. But no pushback.
Great, we're gonna show some love to this side of the room. We've got one here and one over here.
Hi, I had a quick question. So I heard that Terminal A was gonna be connected outside security. My biggest pet peeve is coming home through the airport and you go into a different terminal than when you took off from. So then when you fly back in, you have to figure out where your car is parked, and then you have to truck all your way through the,
You don't find that fun when you land? No.
It's always cold and it's always snowy.
Surprising delights. Surprise, your cars are there. What else you got?
I heard it was being connected, when is that gonna happen?
So the Terminal A to B connect, so it's interesting, like, for the most part, you should be landing in the same, obviously international, not necessarily, but you should be flying out of JetBlue, you should be flying out of the sea, landing in the sea, Delta AA. So I hope that is not happening often, but I'm happy to talk to you offline if that is. So we just funded, the board just literally voted today to fund the beginnings of the Terminal A to B connector. I think construction starts later this year. We're probably a couple of years out from fully opening that. We're also looking at, frankly, our parking facilities, and when we are busy, which we're often February and April vacation, we valet, for example, but I'm told our customer satisfaction is people really like valet, so my question has been like, maybe we should offer valet when we're, as a white glove kind of service, and maybe that might be good for you. When you land, your car is waiting for you, and you might pay an extra few bucks. Maybe you do that. See, you would, look at that. It's on the record, you said you would. So, but your point's well taken. Particularly parking can be, like the Terminal C parking in particular can be, a bit confusing. I think that's where the wayfinding will certainly help as well.
Hello, I'm Olivia from Boston Limo, and I might have a solution for that actually.
There we go. All right.
So, like you, we are focused on improving the experience of our guests from the airport to their destination, and we have so much challenges because we are not yet, we don't have any employees that are badged, so they don't go to the stereo area in the airport. So would you ever consider maybe piloting, for example, a concierge transfer program that looks like that? For example, from the aircraft to their destination, and if yes, I'm all in already.
Like I said to Pam, I think we're being set up. Back that better on the plane. There we are. So the answer is sure. Anything that improves our customer satisfaction. I know we talked. So in truth, we talked just before I got up here. You said that the service is offered in LA, for example, to much success, LAX, and sure, we'll take a look at. Obviously we have signature already in Logan Airport, so if folks are flying private, there is that opportunity to have a sort of sequestered or quiet place if you were a movie star or a politician or somebody who wants not to be disturbed. So those opportunities exist, but sure, we'll look at it.
Not for commercial. Because it's, a signature is for private.
True.
But not.
That's true, not for commercial, that is true.
Yes. And maybe Ms. Everhart won't have to, we'll be able to check her luggage after that.
Oh,
Yes.
Right, something in it for you.
Thank you very much. This has been fascinating. I'm Pam Hamlin. Clearly, customer satisfaction is a critical performance metric for Massport. We've heard that. Do you correlate higher or lower customer satisfaction to the economic implications in the area? And can you expand on that?
Sure. This is where my former consultant will geek out. So the answer is yes. I mean, I think there's literature out there that says for every point of customer or 2 points of customer satisfaction improved in any kind of retail or otherwise environment, you see an extra percentage spend. So as a budget matter, as a business matter, improving customer satisfaction, is accretive to our bottom line. Pam mentioned J.D. Power and Associates. So I guess it was last year, so in 2023, we were ranked 16th of mega airports in the U.S. There were 33. This past year, we were ranked 10th, so we saw a big jump. Last quarter, we were ranked 8th. So now, there is one airport who will remain unnamed, Miami, who was ranked higher than us, where I was there a month ago, and I was wandering around like, this is not possible. So I'm not exactly sure that J.D. Power and Associates has the market, if you will, but it obviously is a North Star of how people measure. So we'll be measuring other ways, but I think we're already starting to see some dividends paid. That said, we've got to have a lot of construction happening at the airport. We know that that is a challenge. And so building goodwill with our customers to say, like, look, you're going to, obviously the tunnel was closed last year. Massport had much work to do, which wasn't our doing, but certainly impacted our customers. And so I think part of it is just building the goodwill, frankly, like a guy Phil Lang has done at the T, where the people have confidence in it. As painful as the Blue Line being shut down this week is, particularly for those who live in East Boston, my chief of staff, Gordon, who's frustrated. People have confidence that, when it's finished, it's going to be. So I think in government and in transportation in particular, it's like building confidence with folks that, like, look, that didn't go exactly as we planned. We've got to inconvenience you for a period of time. But here is what you're going to get at the end. I really believe that people will say, you know what? And look, I've worked in the New York market and the Boston market. And still, Bostonians and New Yorkers will say, okay, if that's what I'm waiting for, and you're going to get us there, we'll be patient.
Maybe we'll take one more back there.
Yeah, hi, Sean Doyle from Bond Construction. I think a lot of the transportation sort of around the airport, from terminal to terminal, and things like that, is really bus driven, right? To get to the rental car center or the T station, you've got to get on the bus. I think one thing that big airports do really well is sort of the automated people mover systems and things like that. I'm a Delta flyer, so I have landed at E and had to get to A and all this other stuff. There's more of these interconnections happening. Any appetite in the future for maybe an APM or something like that?
And what do you think? You want to fund it? No, I'm kidding. So this has come up in the past. I think Dave's probably having flashbacks from when he was at Massport. So we've talked about it. I think the challenge is the cost. It's pretty, as sort of designed in other systems, it's pretty costly. But I would expect this is going to be a pretty big part of a robust discussion for the strategic plan. The board is, okay, if we're going to get to 53 million passengers in the next 10 years, which is what we project, and maybe beyond, and what does that look like, and how do we reduce congestion? I also, Waymo has been mapping the city, and people are like, oh, that's the future. But no, if you're in Phoenix, you can take a Waymo from the Sky Harbor to Scottsdale or vice versa. Like, the future is now, and what does that mean for traffic? There's all sorts of ways that can go north or south for us. So a people mover, but we need an overall ground transportation strategy. I would expect we'll be talking about that, but cost has been one of the major challenges for not doing it in the past.
All right, before we go, how many people have taken a cruise ship out of Boston?
Can't be just me.
So let's show some love for the group. You mentioned a record-breaking year, 500,000, is that right? People, talk about the growth in that in Boston, it's certainly grown in my lifetime. Talk about that and where that might go.
I mean, we're pretty excited about this. Now, I have to admit, I'm not a cruiser, so I don't have any firsthand experience. But if you look at the demographic data of a cruiser just in the US is sort of barbell, meaning folks typically are older than me and younger than me.
How many of us?
Exactly, that's exactly. Older than me, younger than me. And so there, let me do this, okay?
You're gonna be in the bed.
Yeah, exactly. I'll be singing down at baggage claim. So part of the reason to invest, I think, is this is not a short-term burst. And by the way, if you look at the data as well, for the 20 and 30 somethings that are cruising, the percentage of those coming back and cruising is like 30, 40%. So the stickiness, if you will, is there. So it's a really interesting business. And for Boston in particular, yeah, you've got the Bermuda cruises, a little bit to the Caribbean, but it's really neat. September and October are huge for us. Next year, we're going to be hosting for the first time ever a ship that will accommodate over 4,000 passengers. It will be the largest ship that's ever been here by far. And those are also getting bigger as well. So, and it's a huge tourism opportunity. Look, I live in the Back Bay, I love Newbury Street, Faneuil Hall, but we're trying to draw people to Chinatown, to Roxbury, and think about Boston as more diverse than just, those two key tourist areas. There's a lot to show off in the city, and working with the city in regard to that, and we're thinking strategically about that in the future. If you go down there for 2 or 3 ship days, it's we do a decent job, but there's 8,000 people down there, and that facility was not built for that. So we're investing in the facility, but what you also again look at the demographics of Boston is really a unique port of call that people want to come to. So we think it's not a huge part of our P&L, but it makes money, Jim, and we think it's just like a great play for the city and the state. So we're going to invest more time and energy into making that work. So.
Right. So when is that strategic plan going to be done?
Mir, when is the strategic plan going to be done? Next year.
Okay.
Exactly.
So here's the invitation to come back next year.
Yeah, absolutely.
And talk about the future and the strategic plan. I think as advertised, both Ian and Rich have demonstrated that we're in good hands with their leadership at Massport. So please join me in thanking both.